And without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce our speaker. Alyssa Wright is the principal and founder of Wright Collective, a social impact consulting firm focused on helping nonprofit organizations access resources to meet their missions. She has deep experience in global social change with clients including gender equality, birth justice, international, and refugee organizations. She is a published freelance writer, a sought after speaker, and she has developed talent of a variety of fundraising professionals around the globe. Alyssa is an active member of her community in southern Maine and raises three beautiful children while contributing her time and talents to the arts and community service sectors in her community. And I'd like to start today's session by handing it over to Alyssa.
Thanks, Jody. It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me and good to see some familiar faces. I'm grateful to you all for taking the time this afternoon to be with me and to invest in your very important selves and organizations. It's always fun hearing your bio, which is so funny because it's like what 1/10 of who we actually are in the world. But I think it's always so silly when people like when you said my beautiful children, Jody. Let's not talk about the train wreck that was getting those three humans out to the bus and daycare this morning in the rain and muck and downpour that was the seacoast here where I reside on some beautiful Wabanaki lands in York, Maine. But it's an interesting time to be birthing things, and I feel like in our work we're sort of birthing new ways of doing and being throughout our organizations. And as someone who has just come off of a birth experience last year and is a happy 13 months postpartum from my son, I go back to the analogy all the time of breathe and push in these times, and just taking every 24 hours as we can go. And especially for those of you right now who are probably maybe arriving to this conversation thinking about how do I plan for the future and an entire next generation of donors to step into my organization when I'm literally trying to make budget by Friday, which might be the reality for some of you. And so I want to honor that and sort of hold in a container today as we go throughout this content that you might be thinking about what you need to do in the next 5 minutes or in the next 5 years. But I think it's important that we hold both things and just kind of take care of each other and recognize what's really in our control. And for me, what's always been in my control is who I choose to spend time with and what I say to them. And so, in many of the fundraising projects that I get to be a part of, I find that the one thing people are not doing is spending time with donors and constituents more than they should be, right? So, we're in our spreadsheets and our databases and making our newsletters and all the yummy things I heard you all doing, which are very important prior to jumping on this call. But I also want to honor that it's so important for us right now to be in community, and to be spending time with the individuals and the couples and the families and the businesses and the community political and social leaders and influencers, to hear where they're at in real time and to not make assumptions about how they're sort of doing their work or also what their thoughts are on how your organization is showing up and supporting community right now. I got to be a part of a ribbon cutting for an organization here in the Seacoast last week that we've been working with for a couple of years now. And it was just so interesting to me. A few of the people I interacted with, a few political leaders and a few sort of more social business leaders, influencers in the community. And I had so many assumptions about what they would care about or what the questions would be that they asked. And they asked none of the questions that I thought they would ask. And so I just feel like right now we're in a very noisy time with a lot of misinformation. And so sometimes the most powerful thing we can have in our toolkit is the ability to be a great conversationalist and to show up with our hands open and our hearts open and our minds ready to get curious, and to have dialogue with people about what they care about and how they can support our work. So I wanted to kind of set that tone today as we talk about engaging millennials because I'm a self-identified millennial, very much so. Becky, don't laugh because I know you've been on many webinars and in many classes and spaces and places with me. And I am the quintessential, like, if you're going to give me a t-shirt out of a t-shirt gun, I will give you $100 immediately because I want all your stickers and take me out for avocado toast and a fancy latte. And I've already built you into being, my one of my biggest donors in December for my family giving. And so while all those things ring very true in so many ways, there's also a depth and a way of moving through how we think about money and resourcing the world that's different for each millennial and each sort of next gener based on what they're inheriting, based on where they come from, based on how they've generated their own wealth and built their own profession. And so I also want to name that as you kind of listen to what I share today, take it all with a grain of salt, right? No one likes being a statistic or lumped into what every single survey says. But what I hope what you get out of today is an understanding of how money is going to move around this generation, how you can be reactive and proactive to it, and also how you can engage a generation that grew up in a very different way from older generations around them and will be very different when I'm doing engaging alphas to raise big money 30 years from now when my 5-year-old is the topic on the table. So with that said, I will share my screen to kick us off. Um, did that work? Did technology serve us well? Go team. That makes me feel good. Um, and I'd love you to pepper the chat as we go throughout today. Jody and Erica have been very kind in sort of helping field questions. So whatever questions come up for you as we're going throughout today, please throw them into the chat so we can kind of aggregate them at the end and have some robust Q&A. So for anyone who's ever come to any of the trainings that I've done, I'm grateful in my early 20s, very, clipboard on the sidewalk, fundraising self, learned very early on from mentors to do away with the scarcity model. I was surrounded by a lot of incredible, mostly women fundraisers early in my career, who just saw so much power in sort of showing up and talking about exactly what community needed and exactly what it cost. They didn't shy away from saying, "Oh, no problem. We could do it with 2 pencils and a quarter and some, duct tape." They said, "Nope. To actually get this done, we're not going to do it on a shoestring. Here's what it costs, and here's what we need." So I just want to welcome in that even in this era, I don't know how many of you are following the stock market, but it's doing quite well right now. I literally had a donor reach out to me and say, "Yeah, I think we can do the same allocations this fall as we did last year. Market's up, looking great," right? So doesn't always help everyday people because we know household giving is down in the United States and things still have a high cost, but the 1% still definitely have resources to give and are definitely accruing wealth in this era still. So it's really important that we remember that we operate in a system that is billions of dollars. There are billions of dollars every year that come down through philanthropy and through different philanthropic models and vehicles. And so as you go throughout today, I just also want to go back to that piece about being a great conversationalist and not being afraid to talk to people about how their money moves, about the resources they have access to, and finding ways to engage them in those really meaningful conversations. I don't know if any of you follow the Half My DAF campaign that Jennifer and Mark Richer started a couple of years ago during the pandemic, but they just announced their grant allocations from that. And so, there are all these sort of very transparent financial philanthropic platforms out there you can leverage to have dialogues with folks about how they're showing up in these times. I have a call tomorrow morning with a newer funder that I've gotten to meet recently here in the Seacoast. And the way that I'm going to start the conversation is by saying, "Hey, have you heard of this Half My DAF thing? I forwarded it to you a couple hours before we met, but I thought since you love matching, you'd be interested in how people are moving more resources out of DAFs. By the way, is that the vehicle that you give out of?" Right? That's a lot less awkward than just showing up on a call and being like, "What's up, dude? You got a foundation or a DAF and how much money in it?" Right? So we always have to find creative ways to open up these dialogues because how you might work with a DAF donor versus someone who has a family foundation and other people who are making decisions with them is a very different approach as someone in development. So I just want to kind of welcome you to thinking a little bit about today, especially with millennials, how you're opening up these conversations about next gen. I spend a very large percentage of my time every year starting to talk to the younger donors in a family office, starting to talk to the younger professionals within a corporate structure. but that takes time. And it's also really important that I don't show up with all the questions up front, but I harvest the information that I need within a timely period, maybe like 3 to 6 months, to make the right offering or opportunity to that individual, to that family, or to that company. So it's very intentional, this work that we do to engage the next generation. It's going to have you mapping anecdotal and very granular data that you never thought you would map before. But it's really important because you need to know the right moment to arrive, kind of like what we learn in planned giving, right? The right moment to show up with that conversation and not just come out of the gate or make a lot of assumptions up front. It's a deeply relational process, but I will tell you, with a little over 42 trillion on the table coming down to this next generation, I think it's well worth the effort. So I just want to kind of root us again in this abundance and conversation piece because it's so important. Who are millennials? Who are we? What are we doing with all our stickers on our Nalgene bottles? So just very basically here, I'm not going to read this, but for those of you who are curious exactly who this generation is, we're actually getting old. So surprise, we're all in our 40s now. Well, a lot of us are. But it's still funny because sometimes when I go into meetings, folks will be like, "Oh, millennials, like we don't, there's the 20-year-olds don't have anything." I'm like, "Ooh, we're mid-career." Like, those of us, like, we're getting up there. Some of us have teenagers now. We're almost done paying for all that childcare. We might be starting to pay for college. Like, there's a lot of assumptions that people make. I have young kids, and so very often I'll have people reach out and say, "Oh, I didn't want to ask you to donate because I know you've got 2 kids in daycare." That doesn't matter. Like, if I care about a cause, you don't think I can find 25 bucks and go with the frozen pizza this weekend instead of the fancy one? Like, civil rights, it's time. Got to show up. I will eat peanut butter and jelly as much as I have to. So I think it's really important that you don't make assumptions as we go throughout some of these things about who millennials are. And I also think it's really important that you recognize that, I did this presentation almost 10 years ago about my own generation, and we're very different now. I have colleagues who are now partners at law firms that were in law school 10 years ago, and now they have resources to give, right? So I think it's really important to just recognize that, and I'm recognizing this with myself too, that we are aging. And so that presents opportunities for many folks to give more or to maybe give of their time differently than they were before. I think the other thing that's really just interesting and important to keep in mind, especially in this moment where we are seeing a real call, I think, in our area and in our region to support more diverse populations, is that we are the most racially and ethnically diverse generation. I think it's something like 60% of millennial households that are married are biracial families. So it's just really important to take that into account and to recognize that there are different giving cultures across different generations. My colleague Holly Lee just wrote this incredible book called The Big We, about collaborative giving and the importance of giving circle practice. And so she talks a lot about how, her and her husband coming together for the first time embraced their, I think, Korean and Irish giving traditions together and found new ways to give in the community. So it's just important that we honor that. And really think about the different ways that we're honoring the way in which folks give through their different cultures and also religions during these times. Um, and then I think the other thing to think about is, I think that the millennial generation has the highest percentage of higher education of any generation that has ever been living. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that because of that, we tend to really want to look at systems level change. We tend to want to understand the operations as much as the narrative. I think there's just someone said to me the other day, she's like, the questions I was asked by, the kids was so different than I was ever asked by their parents, right? So I think it's really important to honor and acknowledge that while sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, I do tend to find that millennials are often, when they sit at the table, especially with their parents in a family office, are wanting to ask new and different questions that maybe you haven't been asked before. We'll talk a little bit more about this as we get into the rest of today's conversation, but I'm seeing a lot of integrated capital once the next generation takes over. They want to know, like, how do we help you diversify your revenue? Could you ever take on a recoverable grant from us? Is anything investable here? If we gave you a 1% mortgage when the bank gave you a 9% one, how would you leverage that to have more impact? They're having some really sophisticated conversations about financial modeling, operations. And actually, some millennial leadership was a part of a recent merger that we saw in the last month amongst two of our clients at Right Collective. If you want to go and check out the work that Girl Rising and She's the First have been doing over the last few months, they announced a week ago on International Day of the Girl Child a merger. And there was a lot of millennials, both donors and staff, that were a part of pushing the organization, I think, to reimagine its entire model. And now they've increased efficiencies and funding. So just a lot of things to think about, I think, in this time. I think sort of the moment that we're in where things are sort of feeling like maybe they're falling apart, they are falling apart, is also a time to rebuild, right? So I just want to name that it's really important, I think, for you to maybe lean into some of the next geners that you haven't been seeing. Maybe it's because of your own bias towards younger folks. Maybe it's just because you've made assumptions about that. But I think it's really important for you to think about age diversity and who's not at the table. So this is who millennials are. And I tapped on this a little bit, but I think what I'll name here around why focus on millennials. I'm just gonna move my screen. Why focus on millennials is that we're also huge influencers. I raise more money in a crowd fund than any $5,000 donor you could call up right now to give you 5 grand. Like, our social networks have a lot of impact, and with a toolkit and some loving accountability, like texting me at 10 p.m., why didn't you post that thing in the last few hours? Post it, Alyssa. I'm able to raise a lot more money than some of my peers just because of how connected I am. I think that's the biggest secret weapon that you have really with the millennial generation. If you can mobilize us and get us really connected and make it easy to have, a real clear outcome for you, I think that that's where, I've been really motivated in the past to run that crowdfunding page with my story for 2 weeks for my birthday and raise 8,700 bucks from 150 of my friends and family members. So I just name it because I think the organizing effort behind millennials in your community can be really a big catalyst. And again, it's intentional growth, right? So I find in fund development, and it's probably from the top down. So I apologize on behalf of all philanthropy that we make you operate in weird ways. I didn't create the system, but but I do find that, we tend to just throw something at the wall to see if it sticks. And if it doesn't stick really well, we throw it away. We don't do it again the next year. It's so important with this work, engaging the next generation, to see it as generational work. You're not going to build a base of next geners in a calendar year cycle. It's going to take at least 3 or 5 years to build a heartbeat of a program. I think I learned this the most when I helped build a giving circle with a group called Heshima Kenya, which is actually now called Refugee. We started something called the Heart of Heshima, and it was a giving club for young people who cared about supporting refugees and immigrants. The first year, we had 10 members at $50 a month. The second year, we had 20 members at $50 a month. The third year, we had over 100 members at $50 a month. But it took to that 3-year mark to really grow that with intention. So I name that because, again, I think sometimes we do something like this. We go, oh, that was great. And then we kind of drop it because, sometimes from the top down, you might be told, hey, you just got to find 50K as quickly as possible. Oh, we got a gala in 6 months. Hurry up and plan it. It's important that you still keep a heartbeat of your next gen program going month to month and quarter to quarter. Because that's where, again, you won't be freaking out 3 or 5 years from now when half of your gala sponsors are gone because they've aged out or because those companies no longer practice in the area, right? You'll have a whole base and pipeline to bring in because you've been engaging them for the last 3 years in some really smart, low key, but consistent engagement connected to impact. I just started working with an organization that sent us an email last fall, and it was the exact same thing. 5 or 6 of their top families that gave to their gala every year were basically done giving, and some had passed on or aged out in a certain way. And they said, we have no pipeline. Like, we need you to do research to find a pipeline for us. And so I went into their donor base and I said, wait a minute. I was like, of those 5 families, 3 of them, their kids still live in the area. One of them was even named recently in a magazine about an upcoming business leader. Why have you never talked to them? Oh, well, it was awkward. I didn't know how to have the conversation. I didn't want to be like, oh, I just want to meet your son. How is that awkward? Like, the entire family is invested. Like, you have to find a way to have that conversation. And now you're doing it in a moment where you just need to get a check. So I think it's really important that you think about, as we go throughout today's conversation, who are the 2 to 3 businesses or 2 to 3 families that if they were gone in the next 6 months could be devastating to one of your fundraising vehicles. Could be your gala, could be your year-end appeal, but maybe make them the target to say, who's going to take over this philanthropy when these people are no longer in their position? It's just really important. And I do that a lot with the banks. I always try to have like 5 to 7 relationships going around every bank. Just because I think it's really important because someone could change jobs. Some of the folks who are more senior are getting closer to retirement now. So it's just really important that you're thinking about that. And we'll talk more as we go throughout today, but that you're also getting board members and development committee members and other donors helping with that, because I'm sure almost all of you are already wearing too many hats, right? So we got to be really mindful of, if you're going to have 20 extra relationships, how do you divvy some of that up throughout the year, so you don't feel overwhelmed? So I just wanted to name, the focus is for a lot of the things I just mentioned. And then if you want to go do any reading on the $1 trillion wealth transfer that is already underway, it's pretty profound. I find most resources out there on the wealth transfer just continue to be like, there's going to be a big wealth transfer, get ready, and then no toolkit for what ready actually means. So because we know this is happening, I think the biggest thing for me, over the last 10 years is just staying in relationship to multiple generations within a family or a company. It's really important that, if you look around right now and almost everyone, in your donor base at the either organizations or foundations or family offices that support you are in their 60s and 70s, that to me is troubling. You need to be really mindful of who you're bringing in from those entities of more diverse age, even if they're not in a senior position yet, or even if not they're not at the table yet to be a decision maker. So it's just really critical, because one of the things that we're going to see with this wealth transfer on the horizon, is definitely the next generation inheriting wealth that they didn't even maybe know they had. My favorite email that I got during 2020 was a young woman who I met at a fundraising event in Western Massachusetts. And she emailed me and said, yeah, I just found out a few months ago that my great grandfather invented aluminum foil, and I'm getting like $17 million when I turn 35. And I don't know what that means because I'm a barista. And I was like, what's up, sister? Let's chat. Okay. It's like, this is the reality of the landscape for some folks. Families don't talk about money. So there are some young people, I think, who have no idea what their inheritance could be. I've been reading a lot lately about the real estate market in New England and how many houses are going to be vacant because of people who either don't have kids or have kids who live in other parts of the country and world. And so all of a sudden, you're going to have people who, I inherited a house, I sell it for $500,000. It's the first time I have 400K, and I don't know what to do with that, but maybe I want to give back to the state where my mother was a nurse for, 50, 60 years. So just being really mindful of that is super important. So a couple of things that matter to millennials. I think the biggest one is impact. I will tell you, as a entrepreneurial, traveling, working mom of 3 who's also supporting some caregiving for older adults in my life, when I give to something, I need to know that like you really need it and that you're going to do the thing you said you were going to do. And so I do still find that organizations will send me lengthy paragraphs around impact when I'm like, no, just tell me like you need to raise 50K to fund this position at part-time for a year, and they're going to do these 3 things. Great. I know my $1,000 matters because you're reaching out to 40 other people to give $1,000 too. I'm on it, Becky. Here you go. Right. So I think it's really important that you just make it really clear up front what the impact and the need is. I love me a grant proposal and a lengthy, lovely brochure and some narrative. But if I have a strong relationship already with someone and they reach out to me and say, hey, Alyssa, I'm on the board of this organization. We need these 3 things to do these 3 things. Awesome. I'll do the best I can around it. I also find that the experiences, not stuff, is actually still really relevant in this moment for, we know household giving's down. So I think that one of the things I've noticed is that when a middle class family does step in, and some of the research coming out is showing this, does step in to give $100 or $200 to a year-end appeal, they're doing it because they also feel like they're part of the organization in different ways. You might attend their community block party every year. You might volunteer with your kids at the food pantry every month. You're part of their way of doing and being and moving through the world on a weekly and monthly basis. You're not just a one-off, where they give a check or or they they participate in something that isn't already part of the fabric of other things that they're doing. You're almost part of their lifestyle. And so I think that's a really important thing to think about is what are the experiences that you're offering people, or the opportunities, and not necessarily the stuff. So I love me some stickers and t-shirts, but I have gone to a lot of events, and a lot of the research also shows this, where they're upset sitting down at your gala that they're getting like pens and pencils and branded things and all that stuff instead of something really connected to mission. We recently did saplings at an event because our mission was reforestation. So why wouldn't we send you home with a tree to plant? um, but I think it's really important that it's super mission connected. And it's not just like, actually, I have a friend whose parents for years were, is it World Wildlife Fund? They do like all the sponsor animal, get a stuffy and tote bag thing. She's a bigger donor to that organization, or her family is and was. And she always laughs every time she gets their appeals because she's like, this is going to completely die with our generation. No one does this. Like, who wants the free, kind of stuff like that? It doesn't convince us to give any differently. So I think it's really important that you just think about those experiences and the engagement opportunities. Maybe it's a discount to the gala next year on a ticket. Maybe it's a free item off the food truck if you come to our community block party next summer. So just really think about experiences and not necessarily stuff. I think millennials, are looking for opportunities to be agents and advocates. Some of the organizations I like to support the most give me the opportunity to share my voice and testimony around issues that are relevant to my family. I really appreciate that. I also think that it's important that you're really talking about yourself from a systems and an ecosystem perspective. Jody, it's great to hear about the work that you're doing. I actually would love to hear more because a huge part of the work that we've been doing at Right Collective is building community care infrastructure for the last 5 or 6 years. So we've been helping open birth centers throughout the country through integrated capital raises. And you don't have to tell me where your birth center is or where your community clinic is if it's part of a it's a larger structure or larger movement. So again, as you think about your messaging, it's important to name your partners. A huge part of the success, I think, with the capital campaign that we're running for Gather here in the Seacoast area and opening their community food center is that we consistently talk about partnerships. So again, we're part of the Seacoast Impact Collaborative. We're part of a Seacoast Waste Not program. It's important that you show people the ecosystem that you're a part of. We do a lot of development audits, and sometimes the biggest thing that comes back in messaging, which is really problematic, is you're very presentational and informative, but it's all about you. I have no clue who you work with, how you're partnered, how you're supporting the local economy, how you're making a difference for families, how do you intersect with healthcare, how do you intersect with the environment. And so it's really important that narrative, I think in particular, really turns millennials off. So it's important to kind of, have some healthy ego as an organization, but definitely, be mindful of how much you're leaning into it being all about you and your mission and your impact. I also think it's important, to think about just your accessibility online and what matters to millennials. So again, if I were to go and find all of your organizations today on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, would it be clear to me in your last 3 posts what your call to action is? If I go and read a story, what do you need from me this week? What do you need from me this month? How do I help you? I find that a lot of times, again, I get excited or inspired by a story, and then I have no clue what to do beyond donate. Which is great. I don't want to say we don't want to donate, but if it's like, that was amazing, all you need is a check. I have so many other gifts and talents and, things to share. It's really important that you're sort of going beyond philanthropy and thinking about that. So I promise I won't go look at all of your Instagrams after this, but if I did, you can pop something on right now at 1:33 and I won't shame you. um, and then the last thing is, I should have updated this, but the top 4 things, there was some research done actually over the summer. It came out, Chronicle Philanthropy shared it, I think, in July or August. But it won't surprise you that, some of the top areas right now that millennials, donors under 45 are investing in the most at any scale. Are really about protecting people, a lot of immigrant and refugee services, support for rural and marginalized populations, a lot around protecting democracy right now and our civil rights. And then there was some, healthcare reform. So again, all these hospital closures and, healthcare deserts in our country, people looking up the street from them and saying, how do I support the local nurse practitioner who wants to open her own practice? We're getting creative in this moment. And so I think a lot of millennials are localizing, looking close to home, and then on a larger scale, really thinking about protecting human rights and democratic sort of frameworks. So I share that because that was actually vastly different from what this research was a couple of years ago. A lot of it was really focused on climate change and climate change mitigation, which I will say I still think is in probably the top 5 or 6 areas that they're giving to, but there's so much more about protecting our fundamental sort of structures to ensure that environmental change and climate change work can continue to happen. So a lot of those funders have pivoted more to protecting democracy and supporting that work than just doing environmental work alone. So I think it's important, like if you are an organization that intersects with one of these areas, how are you addressing it? I've talked to several land trusts since the beginning of the year about talking about their narrative of, what are we doing in this landscape? How can we keep the work going? But how are we part of broader systems that will allow us to still have voice and agency and prioritize the science in certain forums and spaces and places? So I just think it's important we can't ignore what folks are giving to in the moment. And I guarantee all of your works intersects in some way with these issue areas. All right, sip of water, because that's a thing. All right. So I think the application of this, I always say the 3 A's for the next gen is that you have to be authentic, actionable, and accessible. And so, again, not to put any of you on the spot, but I think that it's really important that I see a lot of amazing content come out from your organizations, and you put so much energy into content, even if Chat GPT is helping you, which I heard in the early on. Totally fine using it too. Perplexity AI, one of my new BFFs. But you have to be really smart when you put that content out about making it actionable and accessible. I still, on my phone, can't go to a lot of organizations' websites when a friend texts it to me and I'm sitting in the daycare line waiting for my car to pull up and I have 30 seconds. I still can't give through Apple Pay to donate to you. And if I can't do that, I'm going to forget about it, make that frozen pizza, get home, jump on email, weep about what Bill Gates is doing, celebrate what Bill Gates is doing. I don't know. What's Gates Foundation doing? And then come back to the table and be like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about that. You never got my $50, right? So I think it's really important that you realize again how both chaotic a time we're living in, but also just by nature. I think millennials as a generation have much less of an attention span. I think it's 37 seconds or something. We stop reading your newsletters. Gen Z, even scarier. They're like 19 seconds. I'm afraid of what the alpha generation is going to be. But it's really important, I think, to be mindful of that. If I can't process my gift quickly, I'm not going to give to you. So I named some of the things here because I think it's important you're thinking about your messaging. But if you all of you share so many incredible messages, I'm inspired. What's the call to action? How do I quickly sign up for a volunteer hour? How do I quickly jump in to share my story? How do I quickly copy and paste something to put on Facebook? One of my favorite things that I've seen a great return on in our client work at Right Collective is when we put out a like, did you know? Like a little unknown fact about an issue or an organization, and we've sent it out to our donor base, and I've seen lots of young professionals really quickly post and say, oh my gosh, did you know that 1 in 10 people right now is food insecure in the state of New Hampshire? Click here to learn about how to get more involved in that mission. Or oh my gosh, it blew my mind the other day that there are folks in Aroostook County in Maine having to drive 3 hours on average for prenatal care. That's crazy. So it's really important, I think, that we're thinking about what some of those things are that can, again, be really easy for us to share. And that narrative is actually part of your mission making, right? You're spreading that knowledge and information. And so by way of folks doing that, they're almost helping you with some of your programmatic work, I guess, so to speak, by getting that narrative out there of what the landscape is really like, what the issues are that people are facing, and how they can get involved to help change the tide. So that also gives people, which I think is really important to millennials, that sense of advocacy and agency that sometimes we lose, right? Like how many of us feel powerless right now? Definitely feel powerless. Yeah, yeah. I feel powerful in some moments, like really powerful, and then other moments I'm like totally powerless, just gonna go make another pumpkin loaf and a pot of chamomile tea. It's gonna be fine. So I think it's really super important that you are making things actionable for me to copy and paste, sign up real quick, put my name on a pledge agreement, put my name out there as testimony for something. Just really thinking about how you pepper those activities in throughout your communications year so that I feel like I matter and I can do something quickly to help you. Um, I actually had an epic conversation with an organization that I love this year because they reached out to me and I adore them and they know I'd do anything for them. And they were like, "Will you host a house party in September down in York County on our behalf?" And I was like, "Yes, I will do it. I can't not say no to you all. I love you. I want to do it." I got up to a week before the party and was really stressed out because I hadn't even gotten the invites out, and I realized it was too enormous of a thing during the busiest month of the year, probably for me, to take that on. And so I had to reach out to them and say, "Hey, I'm really sorry. I have to cancel this. I actually can't do it, but can you send me just like something to email to all the people I was going to invite that's quick and gives them, action item, whatever." And so I sat down and that took me like 30 minutes to do. I just emailed everybody the little blurb, asked them to donate, asked them to get involved, asked them to host house parties. But I felt really guilty not being able to take on that event. I feel like sometimes all we offer is events and donate. All these vehicles that can take a lot of our time or that, to be quite frank, like we're not creative in trying new things. I think we can be risk averse in the nonprofit sector. Come up with your first ever pledge. Some of our birth center partners just launched Beloved Birth, a pledge you can sign on to, where we're working to make sure that 50% of babies by 2050 are caught in the hands of midwives for better birth outcomes in the US. The Beloved Birth 50 by 50 pledge is a web page. You sign your name onto it. You get 3 action items every month sent to your inbox. And some of them are just next time you interact with someone in healthcare, tell them that this pledge exists. And if they know a midwife who should know about it, they can sign up. Hand out a pin in the grocery store when you bump into another mom picking out cereal, right? Like there's all these like very simple, tangible action items that are making people feel connected to the movement. So I think that's super important, especially for millennials who are either starting a family for the first time. A high percentage of millennials are getting more involved as foster parents in this era. I've seen a lot of folks getting involved in supporting as foster parents. And then again, like just the busyness and nature of work right now, with so many folks having multiple jobs and whatnot. So I think it's really important between all of these like caregiving and economic levers that you just make things super actionable and accessible. I also think that, and I've learned this kind of by way of being in tandem to the team at Gather at the Seacoast Food Insecurity Organization. It's really important to recognize that needs change every week. So if you don't have a weekly call where you're meeting with the program team, even for 10 minutes to say, what do you need? How could donors and volunteers help? You're missing an opportunity because things change on a dime. I've learned at Gather that one week you run out of diapers, the next week you have way too many diapers. It's not the thing to ask donors to donate. But I want to be on a funder call and be able to say, oh, by the way, I connected with the pantry team last week. They told me there's a huge need for diapers and formula right now. If you want to drop those off too, you're able to. Oh, hey, there's a volunteer training in 2 weeks. I've got the link in my signature. If you want to sign up for it, you can sign up in the next couple of weeks. It's just really important that you're connecting with the team and not missing those opportunities. So yeah, remember the 3 A's as you kind of work on engaging the next gen. And if, I'm only an email away. So if you ever come up with like some ideas for calls to action and you're like, I'm not really sure if like next geners would engage in this, or if I brought this to a group of young professionals, do you think they'd try it? I'm happy to share some ideas of folks for you to connect with or to also take a look at it myself. So yeah, I think my biggest lessons with engaging the next generation, this is particularly engaging next generation wealth holders or folks with access to wealth. So at Right Collective, we do a lot of capital campaigns and major gift work. So this has sort of been a little bit more of my lane in the last couple of years. Um, but one of the things that I've learned, Birth Detroit was a birth center we helped open in Detroit, Michigan, with a group of BIPOC midwives. I learned a lot in that process just because we were talking about birth stories, and people's sort of birth narratives around the work and the care that they either got or did not get around that moment. There was such a rich opportunity there to engage grandparents, with parents, with their children, with their grandchildren. And so from the get, even though, we were connecting with the older generations that had given to the organization or similar organizations, right from the beginning, we said, we think it's a great opportunity for you to connect your children, grandchildren, nieces, or nephews to this project. Would you all like to come to our open house? And we were able to start fostering relationships among multi generations within different families. The result of that was uh, just because, and I think this is just again an indicator of what I see more younger generations doing in the fundraising space. The older generations hadn't really ever fundraised for us. I think there were different sort of social understandings of what was and wasn't appropriate for talking about money and asking for money and how to go about it. And I watched a young woman in her late 30s raise 600K from her cousins for this project. Literally called them all up, said, "What are you doing? How have you not heard of this? Get down there. We're going to tour it. It's amazing. Like, let's all pool our funds and do this thing." We'd worked with the same older generation for probably a couple of years, never had the same outcome in terms of how quickly they mobilized to pool their funds. So I just name that because I think that some of those social norms around money and class and wealth and power are different with millennials. And so I think it's important to identify that if that does exist in a family. And while you might know who makes the decisions around the actual wealth and money, know who the fundraiser is. Right? So I think it's just really important. Who's going to be the one who's going to be fearless and call them up and just be like, "How did you not know about this? Come and visit it. It's amazing. How much do you have in your DAF from grandpa? I have 200 in mine. What can we do?" So I think it's just really impressive to see the way in which some of the next geners are mobilizing resources. And Burt Detroit was a great example of that. I don't think we ever would have raised $4 million in 18 months were we not catalyzed in the middle of that lull of the campaign by this young woman and her cousins bringing in almost $1 million together. It was pretty amazing. The other thing I'll share is Safe Voices, which was Central Maine's first domestic violence resource center that we ran a capital campaign for in 2021. Was a lot of that work in the community was talking to the next generation of financial advisors and realtors, actually. So again, we were sort of assessing who's making money in Central Maine, who's making money in Androscoggin County, and how do we insert ourselves into that industry or into that into that community. So we had a lot of success with connecting with financial advisors at the local Edward Jones office, or connecting with folks in the accounting firm who do you work with on estate planning, and just kind of weaving that web. But we were very intentional in that even though, some higher ups might have been the decision makers, were more seasoned professionals, we just made sure there was age diversity. And again, I think we proved the theory of there was a lot more willingness by the younger generation to mobilize their networks and to connect us to more people in their industry, and to also sort of fearlessly ask for money or put numbers on the table. So I just found that the organizing effort and the pace at which it went was a lot quicker when we engaged younger people in some of those companies and offices. And I think that has to do with the social kind of care and energy that a lot of millennials have. I think we're the socially connected generation. We came up in the Facebook era, right? So we really like to build connections, build networks. And so much of our professional life has been doing that and really flexing that muscle. Use it to your advantage. Just get yourself in the right industry or get yourself in the right company, and really try to figure out how to mobilize those social networks to have the financial ROI that you desire. So just some lessons learned. So we already talked a little bit about this, but for communicating, I think it's just really important that you're relevant. I think in this existing landscape, it's important to be super relevant. Um, I don't think you can write your December newsletter right now because who knows what December is going to look like. I don't. So just being really mindful of staying relevant, I think is important. I can definitely tell when I get a newsletter in my inbox that it was written maybe a month ago, when I'm like, wait a minute, like they're sending me, they didn't honor and recognize, like, what happened in the last week in our community. I used to find that a lot working in certain movement areas. We did some work in a few spaces where I'd be like, oh my gosh, like, how are you not acknowledging that there was a shooting in that community when you're doing gun violence prevention? You know, it happened a week ago. Why wouldn't it be in your newsletter? Because clearly your newsletter was written 30 to 40 days ago. I think we can pre-plan for stuff, but we really have to keep our messages relevant. I think the last thing I'll just name here is making it, again, really easy to give. So I can't emphasize this enough. I would suggest leaving today, if you're so bold, I would pick someone of each generation to make a donation to you of $5 and ask them how their experience was and how they gave. And just do it as a test. I would ask a 15-year-old, a 25-year-old, a 40-year-old, a 60-year-old, and so maybe someone in their 80s, if you know all of them. Just say, would you go on our website and each make a $5 donation and see what feedback you get, who actually processes it, what struggles they have. I think we need to really honor and respect every generation and how they want to give to our work. So I would be mindful of that. You know, you want to really make sure that because we do have, you know, 5 or I think almost 6 generations now living in these times, you know, you have to have everything from the can mail in a check to can give quickly online to can give quickly on Instagram. So I would just say with millennials, the most important thing is to maybe test it out. Maybe have someone in their late 20s and someone in their early 40s just make a quick donation for you and say, hey, this wasn't hooked up, or this was really confusing, or why were the suggested levels you gave me $5, 1,000, and 10,000? There was nothing in between. I literally had that happen a couple weeks ago, which I thought was really funny. So I always like to suggest engagement ideas. So again, I really like to think outside of the box. My undergraduate degree is in theater, so I'm always thinking about experience and sort of how we set the stage and immerse people in what we're doing so it becomes part of their lifestyle, lived experience, purpose, passion work. So when I think about millennials, I think it's really important to think about, you know, are there trips or gatherings that you could design that are cross generation? I met this incredible woman who's been my mentor now for a couple of years at a sort of intergenerational trip that one of our clients did for International Women's Day. And so she'd been in philanthropy for years, so had I. And so we just met at this gathering that a nonprofit facilitated. I will always remember that nonprofit because that's where I met Sue. So I think that's really important to think about like how you're helping them build relationships. I also think it's really important to bring in other artists and activists to have relevant and timely conversations. So again, thinking outside of the box, I think sometimes based on our missions, we tend to lean into having the same group of scientists speak or the same group of academics speak or the same group of community leaders speak. Try to shake it up a little bit and bring in different audiences. Maybe if you're working on food insecurity, have a cookbook author who was the first Black cookbook author in the, state of Maine or something to write a cookbook come and speak. Maybe you want to have a poet come and talk about writing poetry about growing up in rural poverty. If you're doing a panel on economic conditions, just really try to think outside of the box with who you're bringing to the table. So you intersect with some of these areas and things that next geners are paying attention to. I also think that internships and fellowships are an incredible way to bring the next generation in. One of our clients has an intern turned development committee member now who they met while they were working at Bates. And that young woman who's now in her mid 20s is bringing donors from her family circles and from some of her other internships into the organization. So sometimes our own bias about who holds wealth, stewards wealth, has access to wealth, prevents us from seeing younger or more diverse folks that could potentially give to our work. So don't let that be the case. Really think about opportunities for you to bring them in with their gifts and talent and steward them in a way that eventually could maybe help you to open up some of these additional pockets of funding. I won't rest too more on a lot of these other things. I do think that it's important to, think about what an individual's specific skill set is and how you can engage them. So, I mean, by a raise of hands, I'm sure many of you have heard the ask for advice and you end up with money, ask for money, right? Yeah. So I would say for millennials, it's kind of the same. Like, I'm always very honored when someone reaches out to me and they say something about like, hey, we just put together our sponsorship packet for our gala next year. Would you take a look at it? I feel like the levels are named kind of weird things that don't make any sense. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably true because we all name our giving levels weird things that don't really make any sense. Um, Like I'm a champion versus a supporter versus a rock star. Like what is that? Anyway, so I think it's really important that you think about ways that you can engage people's creative thoughts. If you are cultivating some attorneys to be donors to you, and you have, some your new bylaws or some, legal policies that you're looking at, something you're adding to your handbook. Don't be afraid to enlist them to say, would you take a second look at this? We're signing an MOU with a cybersecurity firm right now. And I'm just curious, if you've ever looked at something like that. We want to make sure we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's. Bring them into your daily work and ask them what they're also seeing in their industry. I think that's really important. I also think that it's really important for you as you kind of engage millennials to organize events with really clear structure and clear systems for follow up. So I've been invited to a lot of events that, are super fun. Like everyone likes to do something at a brewery, and that's awesome. But I'm sort of like, what happens after the event? Again, I don't leave with a clear call to action. I get my thank you email the next morning to donate, but it isn't sort of like, hey, save the date for the event next year. And between now and then, don't forget to join our virtual, you know, uh, discussion about A, B, C, and D that we talked about at the event on December 15th. I am planning right now, don't laugh, for spring of 2027 in most of my projects. I am planning 12 to 18 months out because that's how long it takes from a new relationship to result in a significant gift. It can take up to a year. So just be really mindful of that. Even if you're going to map some light touch engagement, try to just pepper your calendar with set up 2 Zoom calls, a virtual lunch and learn, a drop in casual gathering, and then set up 2 open houses and just plan to get free pizza and send an agenda or a little program outline closer to those times. We don't have to be, perfect or have exactly the concept of what it is, but make sure that you tell people what the expectation is of how they'll engage over time with you and what the opportunities are to engage. I love when organizations just send me hey, we're going to have a open house in December. Here's the save the date, Alyssa. I set you up with a calendar invite. Accept it if you want to come. Oh, and by the way, next March on International Women's Day, we're going to have a global call to action. You can click here to register. The agenda will come out the month before. If it's on my calendar, I'm much more likely to attend it when it comes. And it's important, I think, to pre-plan as much as you can with those things. I also think millennials like to meet other millennials. So I'll talk a little bit about this on the next slide before we shift to Q&A. But some of the, work that I've done is that I've connected, especially inheritors, to other inheritors in our donor base because it's a tricky thing to navigate. Like help them find their peers. If you have someone who's taking over the corporate philanthropy program at this bank for the first time, and someone who's, a year in, but just kind of got their feet wet running the corporate philanthropy program at this credit union, why wouldn't you connect them and say, Emily, why don't you know Sarah? You should totally know each other. Help them build their own social relationships. To go back to my example with Sue, I will never forget that organization because that's where I met Sue, and she's been a game changer for my life personally and professionally. Same thing. Don't be afraid to foster and build connections amongst millennials as they come into your organization. People will remember that and they'll say, oh my gosh, yeah, totally. We met at, the Prescott Park Art Festival that year. I'm so glad so-and-so suggested that we meet there. So I just think it's really important that you're helping with that network weaving too as you go along. I can talk a lot about giving circles, so I won't. I will just welcome you to think about designing your own or potentially starting one up in the community. For those of you who are in the Seacoast, Kate Malloy, who runs Purple Finch Events, just started a really cool giving circle called Missions and Martinis. And from what I can tell, almost everyone who's a part of it is in their 30s and 40s. So it's really cool to see like a resurgence of that happening in our community. I think collaborative giving is one of the most powerful things right now for those of us who feel powerless when we only have $100 to give away a year. So being able to do it in community feels really good. I also think that you can, go to philanthropytogether.org. That's the kind of giving circle um, trainer for our country. And on their website also too is the database connected to grapevine.org of, I think it's over 2,000 global giving circles. Look it up and see what's in your area. You might be pleasantly surprised. I will say part of this moment with people being confused, frustrated, pissed off is that they're organizing. So I have seen some new giving circles excuse me, pop up on Grapevine in the last couple of months, where people are starting chapters of Impact 100, or starting up an agricultural giving circle to support farmers that are facing the federal funding cuts. So just check out grapevine.org, look at their database of giving circles, and it might be something that you want to design internally for your organization, or one that you want to design in partnership with other organizations. How cool would it be to have 5 land trusts in the same region band together and once a month host a giving circle where people get to vote on which initiative across all the land trusts they want to give back to when they pool their funds on the table? I think some of those mechanisms are really cool and offer people the opportunity to feel a little bit of control right now. There we go. Definitely want to welcome you if you haven't already. I see the chat dinged a couple of times, but to put some questions for me in the chat. I think some action steps beyond today. I'm a fundraiser myself, so I'm fundraising in real time while also consulting and doing all the other things. So I'm in it with you, and I know how important it is to have the what am I leaving with right now? What am I doing? So I just want to name that I think if you haven't met with all of your current major donors, for your organization, that might be 5,000 and up, 1,000 and up, whatever it might be. Meet with all of them and ask them about their next gen. Find a way to have a conversation about, do you think that where do your kids live again? And, oh, I know you just said you had a grandchild. Like, would they be interested in coming to the gala next year? Or we've got some volunteer opportunities coming up. We're asking more families to consider bringing, the kids and grandkids, nieces and nephews. Would you like to do that? Or ask some questions depending on the relationship, about what their plan is. If you've been getting funds from a family foundation for, I'd say, 3 years, 2 or 3 years, don't be afraid to say, I'm just curious. Like, I've been reading so much about philanthropy and sort of legacy and what folks are thinking about the next gen. What's your plan with the foundation? Have you thought about that as the years go on? It's totally appropriate for us to ask those questions. I actually have had funders say to me, wow, Alyssa, like, I'm really glad that you asked that. Most nonprofits don't, but I'm glad you're thinking like that too, because we want to make sure there's infrastructure for healthcare into the future in our area. So I think it's important to find a way to discuss that. And if you haven't met with all of your current major donors and don't know, loosely what their plan is, or have a sense of, yes, we want the kids involved, no, we don't, I would definitely do that sooner rather than later. I also think presenting at local giving groups and in young professionals networks is super important. So if you haven't gone and presented to your Chamber of Commerce, Rotary Club, young professionals group, look up those giving circles and go and present. Do it in the next couple of months. 'Tis the season to be generous. Many a nonprofit someone will like to hear from, because everyone's wanting to give back. So just think about that in the coming weeks and months. Even walking into a local business. Everyone thinks I'm a little crazy, but I'm a grassroots organizer, so I'm not afraid to knock on a door and make a friend and shake a hand. So walk into your local Edward Jones branch and say, hey, do you have like an affiliate group that would be interested in hearing about affordable housing and what we're doing in the area this year? I'm thinking about doing a virtual gathering in December to let people know and talk about the ways they can give back. I do that all the time, and I would say 60% of the time people go, yeah, send it along to me, or, oh my gosh, we were just talking about that. It was in the paper. So people are curious now too, I think, how to activate and get involved. Don't be afraid to think about some of those groups and opportunities where you can go and present in the coming months. I also think it's important to identify young political leaders and social influencers in your community and meet with them. So again, we have one of the youngest state reps in one of the counties in Maine here that we're working. I reached out to him and just said, hey, I think that we should meet so you understand what we're doing around affordable housing in the area. He met with us. He also comes with his own donor base. People have funded his campaign. I said, anyone you want to connect us to, let us know. So I think it's just important to connect with political leaders, social influencers. I will go to the Chambers of Commerce webpage, and I will follow a lot of the newer members of the chamber on social, or friend them on LinkedIn, and just send a shout out and say, hey, I just saw you join the chamber. We're members there too. Would love to grab coffee sometime and hear what you're up to. I've literally met new banks and credit unions and biopharma companies when they come to the area, because I'm that lovingly annoying. And I also require that much coffee, where I can take 5 meetings a day with a lot of espresso. So just be mindful of, not being afraid to reach out to these folks to try to build a relationship. Now more than ever, we need to be connecting with people in real time. And then the last one is I feel like people always overlook some of these buckets, but um, I think a good portion of our money, not a ton, for the Safe Voices campaign came from commercial and residential realtors. I think they're often very much overlooked. I think people tend to think they got to meet with the estate attorneys, the financial advisors, some of the folks that are making, big money at a bigger company. But realtors that are every day selling houses and renting space in our area, they have resources to give. So I just think, again, like if you're in an area that you feel like a lot of people are moving to, or you feel like there's some commercial spaces that new businesses are moving into, I would just watch what's happening on like a local economic, sort of development, community development scale, and think about, again, how you kind of assert yourself, and start up conversations with those folks. So lots of ideas. I'm sorry if I added to your to-do list, but hopefully you have a wine or tea spot that you don't mind hanging out at from 7 to 10 a.m. and meeting with a couple of folks. Um, and then the last thing is just, what does it sound like? So I am very aware that I am almost a 20-year career fundraiser, philanthropy, speaker, advisor person. And so I definitely have an ease with how I talk about these things and how I network and build relationships without coming out of the gate being like, yes, I would like your money. Some more, please. At what moment? From where? So I think it's really important that you find that in your own voice and you find your own language and way that you sort of intentionally build a dialogue, where you can start to show people how much you care about your mission, how much you care about community, and sort of how you want to connect them into their work. Um, I feel really, what's the word? Um, oh my gosh, it's escaping me. I don't know. I feel really, I guess, obligated in these times to connect people to places where they can feel like they have a sense of control over their community's outcomes and well being. I feel a strong level of commitment to that. And so when you do reach out to people, make sure that it is really genuine, obviously, that you want them to know what's happening to people in our area, to people, the population that we're serving. What are their real needs and how can we serve them in the moment and into the future? And so I think that's important because it's from that frame and lens, even when I'm representing an individual organization, that I almost always speak. I have my own story. I have my own reason for arriving in the work that I arrive in. There are causes I could probably never raise money for because they're not part of necessarily my own narrative, or also because I feel like I wouldn't put my life on the line for them. Most of the causes I would raise money for, I would put my life and voice on the line for, and my reputation. I can't not in these times that we're living. It's too important. And so I think it's really important that you think about your own approach from that frame. People turn off immediately, and I've heard it from donors for years, when you walk up and you go, "Hi, I'm Alyssa Wright with Gather. I'm running their capital campaign. Did you know we're building a food center?" No one wants to hang out with me when I say that. They're like, "Send us your brochure, kid. We'll see you later." Also, don't call me kid. But I think it's really important that you find the larger frame of how you arrive in this space. So for me, it's always been talking about my entire career trajectory and what led me to the organization that I'm representing now. So when you reach out on LinkedIn, when you send those emails, when you start to get to connect with people, even the family and friends of some of those major donors, I think it's important that you start with, "Hi there, my name's Alyssa Wright. I've been an advocate for women and children since I can remember. My first volunteer opportunity was in a domestic violence shelter with my mom, ironing business suits for women who were coming out of the shelter to get their first jobs. I can't remember a time I wasn't raising money in this space. And right now I'm representing Safe Voices Domestic Violence Center. I'd love to share more with it about you. Maybe we can connect." It's just so important, I think, that we take a larger approach as to who we are. A lot of folks, especially right now, the time of year, are getting solicited by a lot of nonprofits. And so the second that you sound like a script, or the second that you sound like, you're just, this is your job, people turn off. I've had donors reach out to me and be like, "Yeah, this is the third director of development they've cycled through. So, I don't know if I'm going to meet with them. I feel like they just churn through people and none of them are really connected to what the organization's actually doing." So just be really mindful of like how you're showing up on behalf of the organization that you serve, and how you're taking that broader lens of reaching out to folks. People will also want to meet with you because you're a resource. So many of us in development, we've spent most of our careers fundraising for specific geographies and issues. So reach out and say, I've been working in the nonprofit ecosystem in New Hampshire for almost 30 years. I'd love to share with you some of what I've seen. Currently, I'm working with, the Seacoast Health Center. I can tell you a little bit about what they're doing and also more about, what I've learned in building this career. That to me is someone interesting I want to spend time with. I'm curious what they've borne witness to. And I know right out of the gate that I might be pitched, but also it's an interesting human I want to hang out with. So be really mindful of that approach because I think that people will want to hear your depth and breadth of experience. And I think sometimes in development, when we're rushing into booking meetings, we just copy and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste. So just be really mindful of that, especially if you're trying to build new relationships. Have people be curious to get to know you and you be curious to know them. I also think it's important to, have that reciprocity. So again, go in with that curiosity of, I'd love to hear more about what you're doing locally. Oh, I'm so curious. Like, what is it like right now with estate planning in the area? I know we have a high percentage of elder adults. Like, what are you seeing in the landscape? I think it's important that again, you're speaking more to an ecosystem or a community kind of perspective. I also think the other important thing when you follow up with next geners and you're trying to kind of break into like talking to young professionals, they want to feel seen and heard. I've taken meetings with individuals before who send me an email after, and I feel like they literally just remembered that I represented Right Collective and, I was interested in volunteer opportunities. I think it's really important that you listen to folks and you ask meaningful questions. The people that I respond to are the ones who say, yeah, Alyssa, I hear you on the climate anxiety stuff. And I'm really glad that you're figuring out how to grow herbs in window boxes with your kids and teach them about plant medicine in these times. Like, it's so important we can be our own advocates for health. That's someone that I'm probably going to follow up with because they listen to me versus, oh, you care about the environment? Here are 3 programs that are running environment, blah, 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 right? It feels pitchy. So just be really mindful of hearing people in these times and honoring their feelings and what they're going through. And also don't try to redirect them. I actually made a donation last year to an organization where the woman was working on a project that I really had no interest in, but she emailed me and said, it doesn't sound like you're interested in this right now, but I'm really glad to know you. And if you think of anybody who should know about what we're doing, let me know. And I was like, great, that's the best thing ever. You're not like, well, maybe there's a parallel between, you know, gender injustices and, the animal shelter. And I'm like, no, probably not. Like, that's a square peg in a round hole. So while we can build intersectionally between things, make sure you really hear people, about what they're capable of, what they care about. I would never ask someone who's an environmental funder to give to a healthcare center if there wasn't like an obvious connection of some kind through a program. So when people tell you what they care about, first and always listen and learn, and then, reference it back. I heard you talk about this and what you care about. Here's our connection to that. Um, I also think with millennials, the best way to get them in is with a low level monthly gift of some kind. If I can't go to your website right now and become a $3 or a $5 monthly donor, that's a problem. A lot of organizations don't even have that option, or it isn't obvious that that's an option. And I've also noticed a lot of organizations you can't give a dollar to. I don't know exactly what that is, but some of the technologies, I guess, won't allow you to become a dollar monthly donor. So I would just be mindful of that, but make sure there's a low barrier to entry. Um, so yeah, final tips. I won't chat on these here because I think we went over all of them. I think the biggest thing for me as you think about sort of engaging the next generation is just being really mindful of, their bandwidth. I couldn't host that event this fall, but it didn't mean I didn't want something else or some other way to help the organization. It also didn't mean that I didn't at some other point want to have a way where I could potentially host that with maybe a little bit more time to plan or not in my busiest month of the year. I actually let that organization know that it'd be much better to talk in December about me doing it at some point in 2026. But like I can't commit right now to doing it in January or doing it in March. But maybe towards the end of the year, I'd be in a better position to potentially um, support them. So yeah, I'm happy to open it up to Q&A. I know this was a lot and I went a little bit over time, but I hope it was helpful information to you and you're leaving with some ideas. And I'm also happy via email to follow up on anything as well, so you can just keep me posted. But yeah, I don't know, Jody, are you going to facilitate some Q&A?
Yes. So we did have a question from Josh, asking about text to give, which I think that question was from a little bit ago, and it may have really come up in some of those last few slides. But Josh, I don't know if you want to share if that really answered your question or if you wanted more follow-up.
No, I think it's fine. I think just the general question was millennials' response to being texted to ask for money, and just as a general thought.
Okay, I thought you were asking for
Yeah.
text.
No, I'm
Yeah.
just saying a way to communicate.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Josh, I think I've seen a lot of success with that surrounding events. And then I've also seen a lot of success around it with advocacy alerts that are followed up by an opportunity to donate. So again, I follow a national group called Moms Rising. When I can't jump online and remind people to vote by sending out 20 emails, I do want the option to just send in $50 because I still want to support them. So I
Yeah.
think that when it's that advocacy slash donating kind of combo, it works. Um, I also know that I think it was is it Kindful literally a week or two ago put out some more updated data since the beginning of the year on text to give. So you might want to check out what they put out.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I don't know if it's generational specific, but I'm always curious how that flows too.
And thank you. Someone had also asked about giving circles, but I think then we covered that. But Joanne, if you do have any follow-up questions. And also someone mentioned that if
Sorry, I was
are,
I was
oh,
looking to
that's
unmute myself. Yeah,
that's
I hadn't heard of the expression before, but I see the link that was in there, so I can read up on it.
Can I also ask for clarification though, because what that link was and what I think you were talking about a little bit, Alyssa, is like communities coming together to pool their money and then give. Whereas my definition in my head of giving circles is like become a friend, become a community, like different levels, and you're a monthly giver and you give X amount of dollars this long for this frequently.
like a donor giving a society. Well,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of jargon in our space that can be confusing. Like I've heard monthly programs called giving circles. I've seen planned giving programs called giving circles. Like I've seen so many things. So what I'm referencing is, and you can check it out on Philanthropy Together, is more of a collaborative funding mechanism where
Mhm.
it's a democratic practice where people get to determine where the funds go and they go on kind of like an educational journey around it. So some organizations make those internally. So at Jane Doe, the Domestic Violence Coalition for Massachusetts, we created that program for them for young professionals. It was called like the something impact circle. And the first year it ran, they had 4 sessions. The commitment was to do $50 a month for a full year. You got to come to 4 sessions with 4 different speakers around their 4 different pillars of work. And at the end of the year, they got to vote where their pooled resources, what pillar they wanted it to go to. So basically, it was an opportunity for them to feel a little bit of skin in the game. And then the following year, a new cohort came in to go on the learning journey, and the other folks just stayed monthly donors to the core organization. So they've been running that program for about 5 years now. And so it's kind of this like cyclical model of it's basically like a 101 introduction to their work. And then that cohort gets to vote wherever they want it to go to advocacy, community programming, network convenings. They have different things they offer to have them allocated towards.
In Vermont, in some counties, we have 100 women that care.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
you have to almost like do a presentation in front of, not almost, you present in front of them, you do your spiel, and then they vote on who gets the award for that quarter.
Yeah, that's like a grant. So there's external groups. Like I think I'm suggesting go to those Impact 100 groups, look them up on Grapevine, present to them. But you can also create your own, or you could be a catalyst with again with ecosystem partners. Hook up with the 5 other food banks or the 5 other land trusts and start a quarterly giving circle. You know what I mean? Like you can also create things like that, which again I think that sometimes that's where I've had organizations come back, and especially like executive directors or board members say, well, that's not specific funding to us, but you're building community and you're leading around collaborative philanthropy in the area. And so it is important, I think, to participate in those or to also design them, as different collaboratives, because they will eventually result in you getting funding. But yeah, there's so many different definitions, I think, of giving circles, but I would say Philanthropy Together is kind of a good resource for what I'm suggesting.
And we were talking before that about giving $1 just as a means to get started. It was suggested that $1 may not be possible because it takes more than that to process, especially with credit card fees.
Yeah, it's just we're getting rid of the penny. The penny costs a nickel to make, so we're getting rid of it. Yeah, I think it's $3 is the lowest I've seen or something.
Yeah, because for us, I think it's like $1.50 charged for people to do an electronic.
Yeah, that's stupid. Yeah. I still
The
see some
banks,
machines that run
banks
it.
have us in a chokehold.
Oh, banks. We got to create our own bank. How do we do that? Let's get that started.
And then someone wanted to know about, see, I wonder if you talk a little bit about, oh, sorry, I'm going back. A fairly successful 5K walk run fundraiser. This is our 20th year, and we want to boost participation from millennials to make the 20th anniversary special. And our goal is to raise 250K, which is feasible based on last year's numbers. So just any advice on boosting participation for millennials to make it a very successful 20th anniversary fundraiser.
Yeah, I think it's important to identify some of those people in the community that, those high energy, extroverted, very connected folks, and to get them involved early on. So I think that's where it's important to be aware socially, like who's that person that works at the chamber, the head of marketing for the big bank in town, like who are those like really high energy, socially connected folks? It could be a local food blogger or the fitness instructor at the local gym. Like you've got to kind of look on social and look in the community. I look a lot at the 40 under 40 lists to identify folks to get involved in organizations. I go and scout them out on 40 under 40 or 30 under 30 when they come out on those sort of leadership roles. And I'll reach out to them directly and be like, oh my gosh, you got this award. This is incredible. I'd love to connect with you and hear more about what you're thinking as you become a leader in the Seacoast, right? And then that kind of is an opportunity for me to engage them in different ways. And then the other thing is like, folks are competitive. So we know there's a lot of psychology to fund development. And so people like winning. I like to win. So if you get me and a couple of my friends to create teams and whoever raises the most gets the platinum beanie or the fanciest avocado toast, like I'm probably going to do it. So I think it's really important to just think about some of those things. Again, I think it's less maybe about the stuff, but more about like, I don't know, like friendly competition and having a great day together. We actually, it might be good for you to follow. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. We helped design the hot chocolate run in Northampton, Massachusetts back in 2014. It was one of the first road races that I worked on when I was at the other agency. And one of the things that we did was we tapped into the 5 College Network. And we went to all the sports teams at all the 5 college networks, and we asked every sports team, volleyball, baseball, football, to make a team for the hot chocolate run and to run in costumes. And it was amazing. And they had themes, and it made such a splash in the media. The whole like Amherst College boys like football team or something dressed up in Frozen costumes from the movie Frozen. Like it was incredible. Yeah, it was really fun. And they all fundraised, and every player who raised, I think, like $100 or more got a beanie. And then all the businesses wanted to get in front of that audience. They want to be in front of those parents, right? So we were able to get a lot more in sponsorship when we showed the engagement of the collegiate community. So I think you need to be really strategic like that. And I would think about to boost participation from millennials, like have a very intentional strategy. Maybe you want to go to the director of marketing at every bank and play them all against each other and be like, what's up, Bank Prov versus Bangor versus where we want to enlist each of you to have a team this year. Whoever wins is going to get, a free dinner catered for 10 of us at Moxie, a fancy restaurant in town. So just be really mindful of that. Like, I think that's how you can create some healthy competition. I hope that's helpful, Karen.
Those are great ideas. And some of the things, something I was thinking about that UNH does with their 603 challenge is they get a match. And if you're able to make a donation that has the number 603 in it, so you could do, if you did something that had the number 20 in it, even if they donated $10.20, it gets matched if they donate $20. You can
Yep.
play on the numbers too, because that's can be kind of fun as well.
Yeah, I think that's really fun.
Then Caroline was wondering if you talk a little bit about millennials and social media fundraising. For an organization that's never used social media for fundraising and wants to make an effort to tap into raising money from the next gen through social media, what tips would you give for starting this process? What is the most important to focus on for organizations with limited time, energy, resources?
Are you, so specifically, Caroline, are you asking about just social media? I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah, I guess through social media, we have some clients right now who had their federal funding cut and need to turn to the community for the first time. And like they're thinking about doing that through social media. So they haven't really had to have a following until now. That's not the only avenue, but I'm particularly curious about that with millennials. I would think that would be more relevant for them.
Yeah. I think I've seen it be very, it's very formulaic. So there's definitely a formula to sort of what you post and how you engage people in that process. I also think that you have to you have to incentivize people, even to Erica's comment about like the matches and things like that, in a way that feels really tangible. What I've seen on social media too is a lot of people don't want to give just in the era of technology, like through Facebook and Instagram. Like they want to give to you through your own pages. So I've actually had a lot of, there's been some research coming out, especially in the last 6 months, around people are less likely to do a Facebook fundraiser because they'd rather go to your page and do it for you. So I think and that's also better in the investment to get the pipeline back to your own platform and get them on your website and learning more about you anyway. So what I've seen be really successful in social media is when you kind of do like that you sort of do that listen, engage, invite kind of path, 3-point touch way. So, you might start with something on social of like, hey, we want to hear from you. Like you can do a survey or like a vote on this thing. Like we had someone one year vote on the silliest picture of the ED from their like community block parties over the years. And then, whatever picture won or whatever was going to be on the leaderboard for the campaign. Like people do silly things like which is a cuter puppy, like just something silly, or like click here for us to reveal to you, like, you're going to get the opportunity to name our new, office space because we're buying a new door, and every $25 donation, you can vote on the name of the door or whatever. Like you have to find ways, I think, to incentivize people so they feel part of something else that you're doing. And then I think the other piece of that is like offering an engagement opportunity around it. So a lot of things I find on social media when people are fundraising, it doesn't really say donate to this and then come grab a slice of free pizza, or donate to this and next year at the gala you'll get a free beanie. Like there's no sort of like, again, just continuity of like what it is. It's just very much one-off. I also think that I'm naming a lot of things that are very transactional on social, but I also think it's obviously very important to connect people to impact. Millennials and even more so Gen Z are trending towards just giving cash to individuals and families. They're not giving to organizations. And we need to be really mindful of that. I actually have several immigrant families that I just Venmo through a nonprofit that told me about them instead of giving to the nonprofit. And so I just name that because I think that that's a trend that we're seeing more and more of. I belong to a group called Resource Generation, high net worth. It's high net worth millennials and high net worth millennial advisors. There's call to actions that come out from that. I'd say one of every 3 is an actual nonprofit. The other 2 are like, send money to this person, this family, this situation. So I just name that because as you're thinking about social media, the storytelling needs to be really clear who you're helping in that moment, do something new, different, be taken care of, safe, whatever it might be. So I would just be really mindful of what you fundraise for on social It's not, you know, the general blanketed messages of like support our core operating or help our annual fund. That feels amorphous. But if you tell me we've got 300 more families that need diapers, help us buy 500 packs by Friday, I'm probably going to donate to that. So I would say just get the message right on social and then be pretty consistent with following up and calling out donors. I hate when I see organizations post like, we need this, we need this, we need this, and I never get a status update. We need 100 donors to give $10. Then I never hear from you again. And you're just like, we did it. We got 100 donors. Like I could have been a part of like all that momentum building in between. And to Erica's point, it could have been incentivized. Hey, we got 50. If everyone today invites one of their friends, get us to 60. Like, you know, so just be mindful of some of that on social media. I also think there's a I can't think of the name of it right now, but there are some really good trainings coming out on some of the analytics in this era and sort of how to think about using some of the algorithms. But between you and me and the wall, like I feel like a lot of them are fear-based. And I actually left Save the Children, where I used to fundraise years ago as a client, because I was sick of showing the skinny pictures of kids in Ethiopia to get people to give money. So I don't think many of them are dignified in some of those algorithms and fear-based things on social. I think we should still lean into a hopeful narrative and just, you know, be hyper connected with people. Like try to private message as many people as you can and connect them to that clear, tangible need.
And oh, oh, oh.
Yeah, I love Franny doing competitions. I feel like that's been something I've really enjoyed kind of helping clients facilitate a lot lately, is like those like healthy, friendly competitions that, you know, we all need some levity right now. So why not get free tickets to a comedy night with a couple of friends because you raised $1,000 for the food pantry? It just feels good.
Well, thank you so much, Alyssa. I think you gave us some really awesome ideas, and I think we had some really good conversations going to continue those ideas. And we're pretty much out of time, so just want to remind everybody that this conference is still going on tomorrow and Thursday, and then the in-person conference will be in April in Burlington, Vermont. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day and learned a lot from this session.